Well, a warning that our first interview this half hour does include disturbing details. The search of a Winnipeg area landfill for the remains of 2 victims of an admitted serial killer is expected to start in the fall. Late fall is what we're being told. It's believed the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are buried in the landfill at Prairie Green. Last week, the Manitoba government laid out in some great detail about how it's going to conduct this search. Now, some of those details include manually searching through the debris, doing a test search of an area of the landfill to give searchers an idea of what they might be dealing with. The search area involves 3 sections where it's believed the women's remains may be. The sections are as large as about 4 football fields. The maximum depth is 10 meters. Now, Brian Paulson is our next guest and with us via Zoom. He was chief of police in Plattsmouth, Nebraska in 2003 and was part of a grim task of searching a landfill for the body of a young boy. He says 6 months had passed since the boy had been killed and disposed. They looked for 45 days, but they did eventually move on. Paulson later conducted a study on landfill searches to find out how often they succeed. And he joins us via Zoom from Sturgis, South Dakota, where he is the assistant police chief. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being with us again. I know you were with us at the start of the conversation about the possibility of this happening. So we appreciate you being here now to walk us through potentially what our next steps could look like.
Sure.
So I want to start by asking you your thoughts on the search is set to begin late fall. It's been nearly 2 years since the women's bodies were left there. What's your reaction on the timeline, first of all?
Well, it's a monumental task coming 2 years after the fact. I will tell you that landfills keep immaculate records. They know where the trash is put every day, and that they should be able to pinpoint some areas. As you know, 3 football fields seems like a lot, but at 10 meters, it won't be a lot of overburden. When I say overburden, I'm talking about the material above the site that they may be looking at, whether it's 5 meters down, or if it's down on the bottom of the landfill itself. They're constructed pretty much the same way, so any landfill that you go into is going to be built bottom to top, pretty similar no matter where you're at.
Okay. Now, I know that this is an interesting thing that the Free Press Winnipeg Free Press is reporting this morning. They have spoken to an anthropology professor, Eric Bartelink, and he said there's a chance that some of the remains could be found relatively intact because when you have a material on top, there's no exposure to elements like if a body is found in a forest and such. What's your reaction to that, or can you add to that?
Well, we actually found that, having gone into the landfill search here in Nebraska, we got to the bottom of the landfill. Our body was placed in the landfill in January. We found snow and ice that was preserved, and we went in late June, early July. So temperatures in probably the 90s, but then reaching the bottom of the landfill, the temperature was about 32 degrees Fahrenheit. We also found material, roast beef, turkey, chicken, carrots, all that were preserved. There was no, other than being dirty and aged in the landfill, they looked remarkably well for being in the landfill for 6 months. That seal on the top of the landfill at the end of each day prevents oxygen from getting in there. And without oxygen, there aren't many biological agents or germs that'll break it down very quickly. So we were shocked at what we found at the bottom of the landfill.
So, and I apologize for this graphic question. Obviously, this entire interview is upsetting and graphic, but is it possible then, by what you're saying, that if you were to find human remains in the landfill, that you may even find like tissue intact? I'm just surprised at what you're talking about.
No, absolutely. We weren't sure what we would find. Our search was unsuccessful, but finding that material, as well as some other materials that are called midnight dumping in the States, basically the illegal products that are put into a landfill. A family they had a farming accident, clothes that were saturated with blood were found in that landfill and had not decomposed. We had a cadaver dog in the landfill that alerted. We hand dug in that area, found this material, and then tracked it backwards. But remarkably, things don't decompose that quickly in a landfill.
Tell me a little bit about the way the search is conducted. So this search is going to be done manually. Notably, an earlier feasibility study on the landfill search recommended sifting through debris on a conveyor belt. I know that manually they're going to be moving the material to another building and then searching. What are the benefits of doing a manual search?
Obviously, it protects you from the elements inside that building, but the manual search was fairly consistent for us. We had a number of volunteers that were in the landfill and they searched it by hand. Obviously, overseen by law enforcement who, once that material was searched, law enforcement would clear it and then it was moved off manually with bulldozers. All of our search was done outside, not in the building. Our mechanics were excavators digging out the overburden and getting down to the spot we needed to, placing the suspect material where we were hoping to find the young boy in garbage trucks, or excuse me, not garbage trucks, but dump trucks. They would bring it out of the landfill, lay it on a fresh dirt pad about 100 yards, football field length, and then another excavator, a smaller excavator, would come through and kind of sift it, thin it out for the manual laborers. Once the mechanical equipment was done, they went in with forks or pitchforks and cob forks, rakes, a number of hose, a number of material pieces of tools to go through that material, and it was hand searched that way. Once it was cleared again, it was pushed off. So it was just a cycle throughout the day.
What's the emotional impact on those actually doing the search?
It's extremely hard. There were several that came in and would only do it for a day or two. And then they would say, I just can't continue to do this. And I think it was a lot of the fear. And then really the whole psychological aspect of human body being thrown in a dumpster, that we now have to recognize that human bodies, human people are disposable. And that's a tough pill to swallow. At the same token, we had a number of folks, probably 10 to 12, who searched every day with us. And they were just in a good place mentally. We put mental health professionals on site, not necessarily at the search site, but they were within the landfill itself, probably half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away. And if anybody felt that they were stressed or not being able to cope well with what we were doing, they were going to be taken into the mental health profession. We also set that up for recovery, that whoever was to discover the young boy, if we would have discovered him, was going to need help or assistance mentally, because these were just volunteers. We originally started with only first responders, but then we opened it up to civilians because we needed more help.
If what I'm hearing from you is correct, then we have some things going for us here in terms of success. The depth that was mentioned, 10 meters. But
very much so.
Obviously 2 years is a long time after something, after the case developed and the remains were left there. How important is time frame, just to look at that aspect of a search?
So for my research, I determined that it was about 30 days for a successful search. Then the results or the potential for a positive outcome, the recovery of body, drastically drops. And it was pretty immediately at the end of 30 days. One of the best things that you have going for you is if they have those readings, those GPS readings of that trash coming out on those days, they can really zero in and say, okay, this is where we're at. And then the depth obviously is much, much shorter, not as deep as it was here. We were probably 30 foot down in our landfill here after that 6-month time period. So there's a lot of positive going on with your particular search, potentially when it comes.
I want to honor the life of the little boy that you already alluded to that you did not find. Can you share in so much as you would like to about the case you were involved in Nebraska?
Well, Brendan was murdered by his father on January 5th, early morning of January 5th, and then disposed of a dumpster in about an hour and a half time frame between the murder and the dumping of the landfill. And then we did an extensive search. We did 2 weeks of landfill or land search. We had posses and people on foot, multiple utility vehicles, as well as just other departments. We searched there. We did a sand pit search because it was the only water that was open in January. but we did not recover that young man. The father had an outburst in court in April of that year of 2003, where he pronounced in front of the judge and a gallery full of reporters that he did indeed kill his son. And that was the first acknowledgement we had. And then he waited about a month before he finally told us what he had done. Then that started the landfill. So we were unsuccessful, but another part of our landfill was that we kept the mother and grandmother, his closest relatives, very well or highly involved in the search itself, only with information. One of the things that we wanted to do was protect our searchers from the family. They were emotional. We felt that it wouldn't be good to have them at the site. So we asked them to stay away, but they were briefed every day as to what we had done, what we had accomplished, and where we thought we were going to be going the next day.
Our premier has previously stated that the search could continue into early 2026. What do you make of that?
I think that's a great commitment. It tells me that the government, the premier, is indeed wanting to recover these ladies. There's value in them, and I think the premier is giving a long-term search prognosis definitely as a positive that we're going to find them. It will become tedious after a certain period of time, but with that type of commitment, I think the recovery is very possible.
Brian Paulson, thank you very much for your time and your unique insight today. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Via Zoom, Brian Paulson's been with us, Assistant Police Chief in Sturgis, South Dakota. He conducted studies and has written about landfill searches.